Why did the scanner hesitate? That's what rattled Private Miguel Rodriguez. IDs either worked or they didn't. Green light, red light. Simple. But this one froze the system as if the machine itself didn't know what to believe. The morning had started like any other at Fort Davidson. A thin layer of mountain fog hung over the valley, curling through pine trees and clinging to the steel fences that ringed the most secure installation in Colorado. Rodriguez had taken his post half asleep, scrolling through last night's basketball highlights on his phone, waiting for the usual. Uniformed officers, contractors with temporary passes, supply trucks checked and waved through. Routine. Predictable. And then she walked up. Combat boots, civilian clothes, a faded leather jacket with frayed seams, jeans torn at the knees not by fashion but by time and use, aviator sunglasses that concealed eyes too sharp to belong to any tourist. She carried herself with a balance that didn't match the rugged clothing. The kind of balance drilled into you, not learned. Rodriguez didn't know why his chest tightened when he saw her. Maybe because she looked like she had walked out of a war zone. Maybe because she didn't slow down even when his hand went to the holster at his hip. "Ma'am, I think you're lost," he said, slipping into the tone soldiers reserved for civilians who didn't belong. "This is Fort Davidson. You'll need proper clearance. Nearest town's 15 miles back down the mountain." The woman didn't stop, didn't argue. She simply placed an old, battered military ID on the counter. Rodriguez picked it up. His first thought was that it had been through hell. The plastic was scratched, edges worn, lamination peeling like old paint. The photo was almost unrecognizable. A younger woman in dress blues, ribbons he didn't recognize, eyes that looked straight through the lens. "This thing's ancient," Rodriguez said with a laugh, holding it up. "What was this taken in the Stone Age? Lady, I don't know what game you're playing, but this ID is worthless." Behind him, a squad of soldiers coming back from PT slowed to watch. They were young, loud, careless with their jokes. Sergeant Tony Walsh smirked, his voice raised for everyone to hear. "Check it out, boys. Some groupie wandered up the wrong mountain, probably watched too many war movies." Laughter. A female corporal added, "Maybe she's looking for her boyfriend, some private who ghosted her after a weekend pass." More laughter. They had no idea who they were talking to. The woman didn't flinch, didn't answer, she only said, "Just scan it." Rodriguez hesitated. Her voice, soft, calm, carried weight. Not volume, not threat. Authority. The kind of authority that didn't ask twice. Fine, he slid the card through the reader, expected the usual invalid card. Access denied. Instead, the screen flickered, then turned red. Rodriguez frowned, tried again. Same thing, red. Error codes flashed across the monitor, strings of numbers he'd never seen before, and then an alarm, not the drill siren, not the routine bell. No, this was different, classified protocol. The kind of alarm Rodriguez had only heard in training. What the hell? His hands shook. He'd only been here 8 months, and already he felt like he'd broken the entire base. Within 30 seconds, everything changed. Security forces rushed the checkpoint. Radios crackled. Orders barked. The joking soldiers fell silent, eyes darting between Rodriguez's screen and the woman standing perfectly still in front of him. And then came the words on the monitor, bold, unmistakable. Shadow 07. For a heartbeat, no one moved. "Rodriguez," Walsh hissed, "what the hell did you do?" Rodriguez's throat was dry. I didn't do anything. The system's going crazy." The soldiers backed up as Major Harrison, the security chief, strode forward. A career officer with graying temples and the kind of scars you couldn't see, Harrison wasn't a man easily rattled. But when he saw the screen, his face drained. Everyone fell silent. Harrison turned slowly toward the woman. She stood there, still wearing those sunglasses, still unreadable. Then she removed them. Eyes sharp, calculating. A predator scanning every weapon, every angle, every man within sight. "Major Harrison," she said, as if she'd known exactly who would show up. The major's lips parted, words faltered, because the woman standing before him was supposed to be dead. 9 years dead. We thought you were. Dead, she finished for him, her tone flat. I get that a lot. The checkpoint froze. And then black SUVs screeched to a halt. Soldiers stiffened as General Patricia Blackwood stepped out, flanked by 2 colonels. The air itself seemed to tighten around her. A 4-star general didn't just appear at a checkpoint, not unless the ground beneath your feet was shifting. She looked at the woman. For a moment, silence, no movement, just the wind curling off the peaks. And then General Blackwood raised her hand in a crisp salute. Welcome back, Shadow 07. The entire base seemed to stop breathing. Soldiers who'd been laughing seconds earlier now stood as still as statues. Even Rodriguez felt his knees weaken. The woman, Jessica Martinez, returned the salute with military precision. Her voice was calm, practiced. Permission to enter Fort Davidson. Granted. Gasps rippled through the soldiers. A name whispered like a ghost. Crimson Ghost Unit. Rumors told in barracks, over beers, between men who didn't believe them. Operatives so skilled they were myths. Ghosts who carried out missions that didn't exist. Soldiers who erased entire threats without leaving footprints. But Jessica Martinez was no rumor. She was flesh and blood. Whispers spread. Stories resurfaced. Shadow 07, the operative who had vanished during Operation Frost Line. The Arctic mission that never officially happened. The one where all 4 ghosts were declared dead. Only she was. Rodriguez wanted to apologize, but she cut him off before he spoke. You did your job, Private. That's what matters. Never apologize for following protocol. And then she walked past him, toward the compound, toward the ghosts of her past. Inside, the soldiers' whispers grew louder. I heard she once took out an entire enemy squad without firing a shot. No, she infiltrated a compound and left without anyone knowing. She fought off 200 fighters with nothing but a knife. They didn't know the truth. Jessica didn't hear them, didn't want to. Legends were easy. Reality wasn't. Reality was watching 3 of your closest brothers-in-arms vanish into the ice, never to return. Reality was exile. 9 years living as a ghost, pretending you had no name, no past, no blood still on your hands. Reality was walking back into Fort Davidson, because the war you thought you ended was back. General Blackwood caught up to her near the main building. Concrete walls rose like a fortress, hiding secrets the world could never know. The Arctic mission, Blackwood said quietly. What really happened out there? Jessica's eyes didn't move from the peaks. For a long time, she said nothing. Finally, we stopped a weapon that would have changed everything. Saved Sector Alpha 12, but 3 good operators didn't make it home. The world thinks all 4 of us died. Sometimes I think they were right. Her voice cracked for just a moment, then steadied. But you came back, Blackwood said. I came back, she paused, but Shadow 07 stayed in the ice with them. The general studied her. The years had carved lines across Jessica's face, not age, burden. Why now? Why reveal yourself after all this time? Jessica placed a hand on the steel door handle. Because the threat we buried out there wasn't the end. It was the beginning, and it's back, bigger than before. The general's jaw tightened. What kind of threat? The kind, Jessica said, that makes 9 years in hiding feel like a vacation. Her voice was steady, but her pulse wasn't. Inside, she felt the familiar war she hated, between fear and duty, between wanting to run and knowing she never could. She had tried living as no one. She had tried walking away. But the war didn't walk away from her. She needed the Crimson Files, all of them, and she knew once she opened them there would be no going back. Jessica pulled out a secure phone, a relic that looked decades old. But it was. It held technology that wasn't supposed to exist. She dialed a number that hadn't rung in 9 years. Phoenix Base, a voice answered. This is Shadow 07. I'm back online. Silence. Then, Shadow 07, we thought you were confirmed KIA in Frost Line. Death was exaggerated. Her tone was flat, but her eyes burned. Patch me through to the archive, she said. We're running out of time. Because Jessica Martinez hadn't come back from the dead just to say hello. She returned because the same shadow that swallowed her past was rising again. And this time, it wasn't coming quietly. This time, it was coming for everything. What happens when the past refuses to stay buried? That was the question that gnawed at Jessica Martinez as the steel doors of Fort Davidson swallowed her whole. Inside, the air was colder, not from the mountain chill, but from the weight of classified silence. Every hallway hummed with fluorescent light, every camera turned like an unblinking eye. She could feel the whispers following her, soldiers still trying to decide if they'd seen a ghost or a legend. General Blackwood walked at her side. Two colonels trailed just far enough behind to remind Jessica she wasn't trusted. Not yet, maybe not ever. They passed through 3 levels of checkpoints, each one scanning, verifying, and opening only after her ID rattled the system again. Her existence was still a contradiction, officially dead, yet still coded into the marrow of America's most secret archives. The silence broke when Blackwood spoke. Where were you, Jessica? 9 years off the grid, no contact, no trace. Do you know how many nights we sat in briefings wondering if the crimson ghosts were all gone? Jessica didn't answer right away. Her boots echoed against polished floors, each step slower than the one before. I didn't plan to come back, she admitted at last. Her voice was low, carrying not regret but exhaustion. I wanted the world to believe I was gone, safer that way for me, for everyone else. Until now, Blackwood pressed. Jessica stopped walking, turned to the general, removed the sunglasses she still clung to, even inside. Until now, she confirmed. Because the storm we stopped in the Arctic wasn't the end, it was the opening act. The colonels exchanged glances. One, Sarah Kim, tightened her grip on the secure phone she'd been carrying. The other, James Reed, scrolled nervously through Jessica's resurrected file. They reached the secure conference room. The heavy door sealed behind them with a hiss, shutting out the rest of Fort Davidson. Inside, the world shrank to 1 table, 6 chairs, and the weight of classified truth. Start from the beginning, Blackwood ordered. Jessica drew in a breath. Her hand hovered over the tabletop, fingers curling into a fist before she finally spoke. Operation Frost Line was never meant to be a mission of survival. We were sent to erase something no one wanted to admit existed, a weapons program buried in the ice, technology designed to hijack guidance systems, blind satellites, turn any aircraft into a coffin mid-flight, if it had gone online. Her words faded. The room felt smaller, tighter. We stopped it, she continued, but we didn't kill it. Someone else picked up the pieces, and now it's grown. Colonel Reed shook his head. We've seen no indicators of a program like that resurfacing. Jessica's eyes cut into him, cold, sharp. You wouldn't, it doesn't leave footprints, it erases them. Blackwood leaned forward, her elbows on the table. So why come to me? Why not stay hidden? Why now? Jessica closed her eyes. For a moment she was back there. The Arctic, white sky, white ice, the sound of voices over the radio that would never answer again. Because they've found a new target, she whispered, and I can't ignore it, not when the first distress call already came through. The colonel stiffened. Blackwood's face darkened. What distress call? Jessica's voice trembled not from fear but from anger held too long. An F-35, training flight over the Atlantic, went dark midair. No engine failure, no mechanical cause, just gone. Pilot ejected, but the jet was flying blind before it hit the ocean. They reported the same interference we stopped 9 years ago. The room froze. Colonel Kim spoke first. If that's true, then we're staring down a system that can cripple our air fleet in seconds. How many aircraft are at risk? All of them, Jessica said. Every drone, every fighter, every bomber. This thing isn't a weapon you fire, it's a switch. Flip it and the sky goes dark. Her words hung heavy. For a moment, no one breathed. Blackwood finally sat back, her gaze steady. So you came back, not because you wanted to, but because you couldn't live with letting it happen again. Jessica's throat tightened. She didn't nod, but the silence was answer enough. For a long while, no one spoke. The only sound was the faint hum of the secure lights above. Then Blackwood's voice cut through, firm and unyielding. We'll reopen the Crimson files. But understand this, Martinez. If you step into this fight again, there's no walking back into the shadows. You'll be visible, a target. The world may not know your name, but the people hunting you will. Jessica inhaled sharply. For 9 years she had lived with that thought, that someone out there still wanted her erased. She had learned to disappear, to fade. She had lived as a ghost. But ghosts couldn't protect the living. I know, she said simply. Blackwood studied her, then gave a single nod. Then let's begin. Colonel Reed unlocked the secure tablet. Rows of blacked-out files scrolled past, stamped with warnings that would terrify most men. But Jessica leaned closer, her eyes scanning, searching, cataloging. She wasn't looking for records, she was looking for faces. For shadows that haunted her sleep. And for the one truth she hadn't spoken yet. The truth she hadn't been able to tell anyone. That maybe the program wasn't the only thing that survived in the Arctic. Maybe she hadn't been the only ghost who walked out of the ice. And if that was true, she wasn't just coming back to stop a weapon. She was coming back to face the one person she couldn't bear to believe had turned against them. Her pulse quickened, her chest felt heavier. Because the dead didn't walk out of the Arctic. Unless they chose to. What do you do when the face staring back at you in a classified file is one you swore was gone forever? Jessica sat in the dim-lit conference room, her eyes fixed on the scrolling archives Colonel Reed projected across the screen. Rows of blurred photos, redacted reports, coded mission logs. She thought she was ready to see them again, the Crimson Ghost files. But then one image flickered across and her chest seized. A familiar face. A face that belonged to one of her own. The room blurred for a second. She blinked, steadying herself before anyone could notice. But she couldn't stop the thought screaming in her mind. He's alive. Or worse, he's not on their side anymore. Blackwood noticed the slight change in her breathing. She didn't push, not yet. Instead, she kept her voice even. Martinez, tell me exactly what you saw 9 years ago. Everything that didn't make it into the reports. Jessica leaned back in her chair. The fluorescent hum overhead felt louder now. Her hand curled into a fist against her thigh. She remembered the Arctic like it was yesterday, white on white, no horizon, the silence so heavy it pressed against your ears. And then the voices of her team. Voices she hadn't heard since. We made contact at Frost Line Outpost just before midnight, she began. Her tone was clipped, the way you recite a memory you've rehearsed 1,000 times. The weather had already turned. Visibility was zero. They had the weapon core in transit. We couldn't let it leave the facility. Colonel Kim shifted in her seat, listening intently. There were 4 of us, Jessica continued, her voice tightening. We split into pairs. I was with Ramirez. The others flanked the transport. It was fast, brutal. We neutralized the guards, destroyed the transport. Her breath hitched. She didn't want to say the next part. But the storm swallowed them. Radio contact went dark. By the time Ramirez and I reached the rendezvous, there was nothing left, just the white. Silence filled the room. Reed broke it with a skeptical tone. Yet now you're saying one of them might still be alive. Jessica's head snapped toward him. I'm saying I know that face, and if it's in those files, it means the enemy has him, or he's working with them. Blackwood's jaw set. Which one is worse? Jessica didn't answer. She didn't have to. Both possibilities were poison. The general tapped her fingers against the table, then looked at Kim. What about the F-35 incident? Any chance it was mechanical? None, Kim said without hesitation. Telemetry shows the jet lost navigation and control simultaneously. Same signature Martinez described from Frost Line. This wasn't a malfunction. It was hijacked. Jessica leaned forward. That's their move. They won't come with bombs or bullets. They'll turn our skis against us, blind us, ground us. Imagine 100 jets in combat going dark at once. No control, no escape. The thought sat heavy in the room. For the first time, Reed's voice trembled. If they've rebuilt the system, they'll come after our carriers, our bases, civilian airspace. We wouldn't just lose jets, we'd lose control of the sky itself. Jessica spoke quietly, but the words cut deep. And once you lose the sky, you've already lost the ground. The room fell into silence again. Only Jessica's breathing betrayed her tension. She couldn't shake the image of that familiar face in the file. It wasn't just the system that had survived the Arctic. Someone else had too. And if he had crossed over, if he had become the architect of what was happening now. She forced the thought down, focused on the mission. That's what she always told herself. Mission first, feelings later. But the truth was the mission was personal. It always had been. Blackwood broke the silence. Martinez, if we move on this, you'll be leading it. No one else alive knows what you know. But you need to decide now, are you in this as a ghost or as a soldier? Jessica's eyes locked on hers. I'm in this as someone who doesn't get to walk away. Not anymore. Blackwood gave the faintest nod. It was settled. The door hissed open and a young lieutenant stepped inside, pale and nervous. Ma'am, urgent report. Another aircraft went down, not training this time. Patrol squadron over the Mediterranean. Same interference. Pilots barely made it out. Jessica's stomach turned cold. It was starting faster than she feared. Blackwood's voice was ice. Get me direct access to European command, and put Shadow 07 on temporary operational clearance, effective immediately. The lieutenant saluted and hurried out. Jessica stared at the table, her reflection dim in the polished surface. She didn't want this fight. She buried it, buried herself, but the fight had found her anyway. And if the face she saw in that file was truly alive, then this wasn't just about stopping a weapon. It was about saving, or stopping, the only person who knew her better than anyone else. Her hand trembled under the table. She clenched it into a fist until her knuckles burned. Because sometimes the dead didn't stay dead. Sometimes they came back to finish what you couldn't. What does it feel like to step back into a life you swore was over? Jessica found out the moment she stepped into the armory. The smell of gun oil, cold steel, and dustless air hit her like a forgotten memory. For years she had lived without it, buying groceries like any other face in the crowd, sleeping in worn motels under names that weren't hers. But the second the racks of weapons stretched before her, she felt the pull, the gravity of who she used to be. Colonel Kim watched her closely. It's been a long time, Captain. You sure you're ready to pick up where you left off? Jessica's hand lingered over an M110 rifle. She traced her fingers along its rail but didn't lift it. I'm not here to pick up where I left off, she said quietly. I'm here because no one else can. Kim didn't argue. She only studied Jessica the way a surgeon studies scar tissue, fascinated at how it held together after so much damage. General Blackwood entered, her boots echoing across the tile. She carried a file that seemed heavier than paper should allow. You're not the only one we're bringing back, she said flatly. We've activated dormant assets across Europe and the Med. If this system is spreading, we'll need eyes and hands everywhere. But you, she held the file out, You'll lead the strike team." Jessica didn't take the file at first. Her hand hovered over it, hesitation shaking her fingers. "And if what I saw in the archives is real?" Blackwood's face hardened. "Then you confront it, whatever it is, whoever it is. You'll do what has to be done." The weight of that sank in. Jessica had lived with ghosts for 9 years. Now she was being told one of them might be flesh and blood, and her duty might demand she end him. She finally took the file. Inside were maps, coded intercepts, blurry satellite photos, and one image that twisted her gut, a figure on a snowy ridge, grainy but unmistakable. Ramirez. Her partner, her brother-in-arms. Alive, or at least moving under someone else's command. Jessica shut the file too quickly. Kim noticed but said nothing. Instead, Blackwood spoke. "You'll leave for Naples tonight. From there, insertion onto the USS Truman. NATO's already reported strange interference around their patrols. You'll get your first look at what we're facing." Jessica gave a curt nod. No argument, no delay. Inside, though, the storm was rising. That night, as she sat in the barracks assigned to her, the silence pressed in. She hadn't slept in military quarters since before the Arctic. The bed was too neat, the walls too bare. She turned the secure phone over in her hand again and again, debating a call she hadn't made in years. Finally, she dialed. The voice that answered was gravelly, tired. "Home plate. This is Shadow 07. The silence on the other end was long. Then softly, 9 years and you sound like you never left." Jessica closed her eyes. "You kept me active. We hoped you never need to use it again." Well, Jessica exhaled. Hope didn't hold. She almost told him about Ramirez. Almost. But the word stayed lodged in her throat. To speak it aloud would make it real. Instead, she asked the question that haunted her most. If someone you trusted, someone you would have died for, turned, would you still see them as the same person? The voice on the line was quiet. Then, "Sometimes survival changes a soldier. Sometimes it rewrites them. But if you face him, Jessica, don't hesitate. Ghosts don't get second chances." The line went dead. She sat there in the dark, file still closed on her desk, heart pounding like a drum she couldn't silence. She wanted to believe Ramirez had survived as she had, that he had stayed loyal, but the evidence, the grainy image, told another story. And if she was right, then this mission wasn't about bringing him home. It was about stopping the only man she had ever trusted to watch her back. By dawn, Jessica was on the transport to Naples. The engines roared, the fuselage shook, but her mind was quieter than it had been in years. Determined, resigned. Because ghosts didn't return to finish life. They returned to finish wars. How fast can the sky turn against you? That was the question echoing through Jessica's mind as she stepped onto the deck of the USS Truman. The carrier stretched endlessly beneath her boots, its steel frame vibrating with the hum of engines, radar, and tension. Sailors moved in orchestrated chaos, yellow vests guiding jets into position, green crews checking catapults, red handling ordnance. Above them, FA-18s idled with their wings folded, pilots strapped in and waiting. Jessica hadn't been on a carrier in almost a decade. The sound, the smell of jet fuel, the raw pulse of power, it was familiar and foreign at the same time. She paused, her eyes scanning the deck, her instincts pulling her to every possible threat, every blind corner. NATO commanders met her near the island tower, their faces carved with exhaustion. Admiral Foster, a tall man with hollow eyes, extended a stiff hand. "Captain Martinez, we were told you were." He stopped himself. "Dead wasn't a word you said on a ship already haunted by near disasters." Jessica ignored the hand and looked him straight in the eye. "Tell me about the patrol." The Admiral's jaw tightened. "Squadron Bravo 4. They lifted off from Sigonella 3 days ago. Mid-flight, all 4 jets reported navigation collapse. 2 ejected before impact, 2 went into the water, 1 pilot lost. Jessica's throat constricted. She had heard the words before years ago. Different place, same pattern. Telemetry, she asked. The admiral signaled to a lieutenant who pulled up data on a secure tablet. Green lines became chaos across the screen. The jet systems blinked out one by one. Control vanished. Then nothing. Jessica's eyes narrowed. Same signature, same parasite code we stopped in the Arctic. The admiral looked at her sharply. You've seen this before. Jessica nodded slowly. I lived it. The deck trembled under them as another fighter thundered into the sky. Jessica felt the roar in her bones, but beneath the noise she heard something else, her own pulse, fast, uneven. Because she knew what was coming. The admiral lowered his voice. Our people are terrified, Captain. The idea that something out there can reach into their cockpits and snatch control from them, it's breaking morale. Pilots don't trust their wings, and if we can't trust the sky, we can't fight. Jessica let the words settle. She thought of Ramirez, his face frozen in that classified file. Was he behind this, or was he trapped inside it? We'll need to test, she said firmly. Controlled flight. 1 bird up, minimal crew. I want to see how fast they can take the system. Admiral Foster frowned. Too dangerous. Too late for safe, Jessica shot back. The admiral studied her. The sharpness in her eyes left no room for negotiation. Finally, he nodded. Within the hour, Jessica found herself strapped into the backseat of an FA-18. She hadn't touched a cockpit in years, but muscle memory returned the second her fingers grazed the harness. The pilot beside her, a young lieutenant named Harris, looked nervous. You sure about this? He asked. Jessica locked eyes with him. If it happens, don't fight the jet. Eject, that's an order. The engines roared, the catapult engaged, and then they were airborne, slamming into the sky with brutal force. The sea spread out beneath them, endless blue broken only by the steel dot of the Truman. For a moment, Jessica let herself breathe. Then it happened. The HUD flickered, warnings screamed, controls stiffened. The jet shuddered like it was caught in invisible hands. Harris cursed, pulling at the stick, but the plane wasn't his anymore. Jessica felt the cold recognition slice through her. It was the same, exactly the same. The parasite had them. Her heart hammered, but her voice was calm. Harris, now eject. He hesitated, panic locking his body. Jessica reached for the lever herself. Now. The canopy blew, a violent rush of wind, then weightlessness as the seat launched. The world turned upside down, ocean and sky trading places in a blur. The chute yanked hard, jerking her back to breath. Below them, the jet spiraled, powerless like a puppet with its strings cut. Then impact, a spray of white against the blue sea. Gone. Harris dangled in his chute a few hundred yards away, eyes wide in disbelief. Jessica locked onto him, guiding her descent, making sure he was steady. When she hit the water, the cold bit deep, but she barely noticed. Her mind was burning with clarity. It was real, it was active, and it was already stronger than before. By the time the rescue team pulled her from the waves, her decision was sealed. This wasn't just a system. It wasn't just a ghost from the Arctic. It was a hand reaching for every sky they had left. And if Ramirez was behind it, if he had crossed the line, then Jessica knew what her mission truly was. Not just to stop the weapon, but to confront the man who once would have died for her, and now might want her dead. What if the enemy you were hunting knew you better than anyone else alive? Jessica asked herself that question as she sat in the Truman's briefing room, dripping salt water, wrapped in a dry uniform someone had tossed her. Her hair was still wet from the ditching, her skin raw from the cold, but her mind was sharp. Clear, too clear. The projection screen showed the data from the doomed FA-18 flight. The parasite code had hijacked the jet in seconds, the interference pattern unmistakable, a match to Frost's line, and yet more advanced, faster, meaner. Admiral Foster paced. This confirms it. Whoever's running this, they're not testing anymore. They're deploying. NATO's reporting spikes across 3 sectors, Ionian Sea, Black Sea, and north of Libya. It's spreading. Jessica leaned forward. Not spreading, coordinating. Whoever's behind this isn't improvising. They're staging. That means they have command infrastructure. Colonel Kim tapped the screen. Signals triangulation gives us 3 possible hubs, but none of them line up with known adversary installations. They're ghost stations. Mobile, adaptive. Jessica's gaze stayed fixed on the code, lines of characters burning into her mind. Her stomach twisted. There were fragments hidden in the stream. Patterns no one else noticed, but she did, because she knew the man who wrote them. She heard his voice in the cadence of the code. Ramirez. The thought made her chest hollow. She forced herself to speak. It's him. The room stilled. Foster frowned. Who? Jessica swallowed hard. Ramirez, my partner, he was Crimson Ghost. He went into the ice with us. And now, she pointed at the screen, that's his work. The silence that followed was suffocating. Blackwood's face was unreadable, but her eyes were not. They carried the question Jessica couldn't bear to ask herself. Was he alive, or had he chosen the other side? Kim broke it with clinical calm. If your assessment is right, that changes everything. This isn't just stolen tech. This is insider knowledge. The system's evolution proves he had years to refine it. If he's leading them, they know us. Every tactic, every blind spot. Jessica's voice was low, but steady, which means they'll predict our moves before we make them. Foster slammed his hand on the table. Then we can't wait. We take the fight to them. Preemptive strike on every suspected hub. Clear the board. Jessica turned, eyes narrowing. And if Ramirez is there, if it's really him, you bomb first, you'll never know if he could have been pulled back. You'll bury the truth under rubble. Her words cut sharper than intended. The Admiral looked away, jaw tight. Blackwood finally spoke, voice like stone. Martinez, if it is Ramirez, you're the only one who can get close enough to confirm it. And if he's chosen this path, she let the weight of silence finish the sentence. Jessica clenched her fists under the table. She thought of the long nights in Frost Line, Ramirez keeping her awake with jokes over frozen rations, his voice steady over comms when hers cracked, his hand dragging her out of a whiteout when she couldn't see her own boots. He had been her anchor, her brother, in some ways more than that. And now she was being asked to erase him. She forced her face blank. Where? The nearest signal hub. Kim pulled up a map. Coordinates point to a freighter flagged under a shell company drifting in the Aegean. No official crew. It's a moving platform. Could be a relay station. Could be command. Jessica studied it. A freighter. Mobile, isolated, perfect for hiding in plain sight. Her gut twisted. If Ramirez was alive, he'd want to be somewhere just like that. Blackwood's voice broke through her thoughts. We'll send a team, but you lead, you make contact, you confirm. Confirm, the word stuck like glass in her throat. Jessica nodded slowly. She had no choice. Later that night, alone in the makeshift quarters on the Truman, she sat on her bunk, staring at the pistol in her hands. The metal felt heavier than it should. She thought about Ramirez's laugh, about the way he had once told her that ghosts didn't die, they just faded into the white. Maybe he had been right. Maybe he had just faded. Her chest ached. Her hands shook. For years she had wondered if she was the only survivor, if the others had died in pain, abandoned in the snow. Now she was staring at the truth that one of them had walked out too, but not as the man she knew. And if he had become the architect of this weapon, then Jessica's mission was no longer about stopping a faceless enemy. It was about facing the one man she had trusted with her life. And deciding, in the silence of combat, whether trust could survive betrayal, or if ghosts could only meet again as enemies. What happens when the hunter becomes the haunted? Jessica asked herself that as the RHIB cut through the night waters of the Aegean. The freighter loomed ahead, dark, unmarked, drifting like a carcass in the sea. No running lights, no crew visible on deck, just a floating shadow under the stars. Her team of 6 moved in silence, faces painted, rifles cradled. They were NATO's best, yet Jessica could feel their glances at her. The legend sitting among them, a ghost who shouldn't exist. She ignored it. The only thing that mattered was what waited inside that steel hull. The boat slowed, grappling hooks hissed, ropes slid taut. One by one the operators climbed. Jessica went last. Her boots touched rusted deck plate, the salt wind biting at her face. "Clear," whispered Sergeant Ellis, the point man. They moved as one, silent shadows sweeping through shadows, past abandoned cargo containers, past coiled ropes stiff with salt. The ship was dead quiet, too quiet. Inside the superstructure, the air reeked of oil and metal. Flashlights swept empty corridors. Crates stacked high, sealed with false company labels. Jessica's gut tightened. This wasn't cargo. This was camouflage. They reached the control room. Equipment hummed, lights blinking. Banks of computers alive with code. The parasite pulsing across screens. Ellis cursed under his breath. This is it. Jessica stepped forward, eyes scanning the code. And then her breath caught. Embedded in the stream was a signature, subtle, buried deep. A mark no outsider would ever notice. A call sign. R07. Her chest went hollow. Ramirez. The operators looked at her, waiting. She forced her voice steady. Pull the drives, secure what you can, but nobody touches the core. As they moved, a sound echoed. A metallic thud, distant then closer. Boots. Jessica raised her hand. Silence. Then a voice rolled down the corridor. Calm, familiar. "You shouldn't have come here, Jess." The team froze. Jessica's blood turned to ice. She knew that voice. Ramirez. The footsteps drew closer, steady, unhurried. He stepped into the dim light, beard longer, eyes colder, but unmistakably him. His weapon hung loose in his hands, not raised, not threatening, just there. The team bristled, rifles aiming, but Jessica lifted her hand, keeping them steady. Her mouth was dry. "You're alive." A faint smile touched his lips. "Alive, that depends on who you ask." Her heart pounded. She searched his face for the man she remembered. The one who had carried her through Frost Line, who had kept her sane in the white silence. But the eyes staring back weren't the same. "You built this," she whispered. His smile faded. "I rebuilt it, perfected it, because the war never ended, Jess. You think we saved the world? No, we bought it time. And what did it do with that time? Squandered it. Same corruption, same decay. Someone had to finish what we started." Jessica shook her head slowly. "This isn't saving, this is control." Ramirez's voice hardened. "Control is the only way to survive. You know that better than anyone." The operators shifted uneasily. Fingers tightened on triggers. Jessica's chest ached. Memories pulled at her. Laughter shared over rations. The sound of his voice guiding her through whiteout. His hand gripping hers when they thought the storm would bury them both. She wanted to reach for that man. But the one standing here wasn't him. Or maybe he was, and that was worse. Ramirez took a step closer. His eyes softened just for her. "Walk away, Jess. You've carried this ghost long enough. You know the cost of loyalty. Don't make me prove it to you." Her throat closed. The weight of the pistol at her side felt unbearable. Because for the first time in years, she wasn't sure if she was facing an enemy. Or the last person who had ever truly known her. How do you pull the trigger on the past? The question burned in Jessica's chest as Ramirez stood before her, shadows cutting across his face in the dim corridor of the freighter. Her team waited, tense, rifles raised, breaths held. One wrong move and the steel walls would echo with gunfire. But Ramirez wasn't afraid. He looked at her with a calm that chilled her more than the Arctic ever had. "You don't understand," he said softly. "I stayed behind in the white because I saw the truth. Nobody wins these wars, Jess. Not us. Not them. Only the ones who control the sky. I chose to stop being a pawn." Her voice cracked despite her effort to hold it steady. "By building a weapon that blinds pilots in midair. By killing the same kind of people you once swore to protect." Ramirez's eyes flickered just for a second with something almost human. Guilt, regret, or just memory. "You think I wanted this?" His voice sharpened. "I tried to bring it to them. I tried to make them listen. They buried me same as they buried you. But I didn't stay buried. I adapted. And if the world burns a little to survive, so be it." Ellis shifted beside her, whispering urgently, "Captain, give the word." Jessica raised a hand. "Stand down." Every muscle in her body screamed against the order, but she couldn't let this become a firefight. Not here, not with him. Her throat tightened. "You could have called me. You could have told me you were alive." Ramirez's face softened. "And what would you have done? Run to me? Or drag me back into a system that chews us up and forgets our names? You think I didn't know where you were, Jess? I left you alone because I thought, maybe, you finally escaped it, but now you're here. And if you're here, I can't protect you." The weight of his words pressed like stone on her chest. She wanted to believe him. Wanted to believe this was still the man who had carried her through ice and silence. But the blinking code on the screens around them told another story. A weapon alive, ready to strangle every sky. His creation. His choice. Her hand lowered to her pistol. "Don't," Ramirez said quietly. His eyes locked on hers, no malice, just certainty. "If you raise that weapon, you won't be pointing it at me. You'll be pointing it at the only person who never left you." Jessica's pulse thundered in her ears. For a moment the freighter dissolved and she was back in Frost line, white-out, static, his hand dragging her forward, his voice shouting through the storm. "Move, Jess. Don't stop." Her vision blurred with heat. "I buried you once," she whispered. "Don't make me do it again." The air between them went still. Then Ramirez smiled, tired, sad, almost peaceful. "You're still you. That's why I always knew it had to be you standing here." And then, with one slow step backward, he vanished into the shadows. A smoke charge hissed, filling the corridor in a choking fog. "Contact!" Ellis shouted, firing into the haze. Bullets sparked against steel, but Ramirez was gone. The freighter shook suddenly, alarms blaring, systems overloading. Jessica's eyes shot to the screens. The parasite was purging itself, burning the drives, wiping evidence clean. "Pull out," she barked, "now." The team scrambled, ripping what they could, hauling drives under their arms. Jessica held the rear, her pistol raised, her eyes burning through the smoke, hopping for one last glimpse. But Ramirez was already a ghost again. Back on the RHIB, engines screaming across black water, the freighter behind them erupted in flames. A hollow thud rolled across the sea, fire climbing into the night. Jessica watched the blaze, her jaw clenched, salt spray on her face mixing with tears she refused to shed. She had come back from the dead to stop a weapon. Instead, she'd found a ghost she couldn't kill, and a war that refused to end. The others said nothing. They didn't need to. As the freighter's fire dwindled into smoke, Jessica's voice was quiet, but the team heard every word. "Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It doesn't plead. It doesn't explain. It simply acts. And tonight it walked away into the dark." Her eyes stayed on the horizon, knowing this wasn't over. Because Ramirez was still out there. And the sky would not stay safe until one ghost finally silenced the other.